Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's Believe in Bengal podcast presented by FanDuel. I'm your host, Solomon Wilcots. We got a lot to talk about. We got to talk about the NFL scouting combine. We get to talk about Joe Burrow a little bit. We get to talk about Trey Hendrickson and where the Bengals are going this offseason when it comes to rebuilding their team and trying to get back to the postseason. But first, we got to start with talking about something maybe the team or multiple teams around the NFL don't want anyone to talk about, because just recently the NFL filed a grievance against the players union, barring them from publishing their grades of the 32 clubs. As you well know, the NFL Players Association, on an annual basis, they would put out their grades on all 32 teams. They would grade anywhere from how you treated their families. They would grade the front office. They would grade the ownership. They would grade team facilities, the coaching staff, the general manager, and the ownership group. Well, the NFL Players Association, despite the fact that the NFL filed a grievance and won, stayed and then barred the teams from publishing those grades and making it public, those grades have gotten out anyway. I don't know who published it. I don't know who put it out, but it has seen the light of day, and we have them. Look at that right here. Can you see that? I hope you can. So we're going to go over these grades, but remember, the NFL sent every single team, or the players union, they sent them basically a memo stating that it would violate the collective bargaining agreement if they made these grades public. Now I'm laughing simply because I think it's very petty, because think about this. Remember NFL owners, Buffalo Bills owner Terry Pegula, when he fired Sean McDermott, he didn't have any problem publicly criticizing a player, his wide receiver, Keon Coleman, right? Remember Woody Johnson, the owner of the New York Jets, before they played the Bengals, by the way, he strongly criticized the quarterback, Justin Fields, in so much that Fields ended up having his best game of the season as the Jets came into Paycor Stadium to beat the Cincinnati Bengals. So I want to know, why is it okay for NFL owners to publicly criticize players, to say we don't want to sign them to contracts if they're going to be in jail? And it's okay. The owner should get to say that, but players should also get to say something about their working conditions. Just like you and I'm sure if we worked in facilities or maybe were treated a certain way on the job, we could air those grievances. We have the right to dissent as U.S. citizens. We can make public our treatment, okay, in the workplace. And I don't know why players, for whatever reason, okay, the NFL owners tried to say that it is disparaging their teams, but I think when you give your team a grade in certain categories, I don't see that as disparaging at all. Now, I'll explain that, because here is how the Bengals voted. In fact, when the voting was all done, or the grades, let's just say it was a grade, the Cincinnati Bengals ranked 28th out of 32 teams with their overall grade. They received the F- when it came to the food and dining area. Now, I will say this. I've eaten in the Bengals facilities. I would not give them an F. I think they have multiple stations where you could eat. You could have sandwiches. You could have subs. You could have what the chefs are cooking that day. Anything from stir fry. You could have hot meals. You could have a cold meal. You could have a healthy, more nutritious meal. I don't think it deserves an F. Now, it's just in my opinion, but I would disagree. The Bengals also received an F in nutrition and dietitian. I could not even weigh in on that, but that's how they were graded. They received an F- in treatment of families. Now, I got to tell you, that's something that the Cincinnati Bengals should take much more serious. These are the things that players talk around our league. When it's time to sign players in free agency, do you know what every player want to know? What is the game day experience like for my family, for my wife and kids? Are you going to put them in a tent that has no heat in December and November while you and your family are in a warm, cozy, comfy? And here's what you got to think. And I'm just saying, I played for 3 teams in the NFL. Played for the Minnesota Vikings. I played for Pittsburgh Steelers. The Cincinnati Bengals are near and dear to my heart because they're the team that drafted me. But I still travel and get invited to team events in Pittsburgh. I still go back to Minnesota, and I'm part of team events and family weekends there. I do know that the treatment is wonderful for families of players and former players for those teams. And I do know that the Rooney family treat all of their players and former players like family. If you play for the Pittsburgh Steelers, currently or in the past, you were treated like you are a member of the Rooney family. This is just fact. This is not hyperbole. I'm just explaining it, and I don't have an axe to grind. And I do believe that the Cincinnati Bengals in the ownership group ought to ask themselves, are the players a member of the Brown and Blackburn family, or they are separate from their family? Because the players on the team voted F-. Like all my years in school and in college, I never got an F, by the way. But I don't even know what an F- is. I don't know how you can get below an F. How do you get an F- in anything? You gotta be not only trying or not trying, you gotta be intent to do bad. Like, so look, Bengals, you could do better. By the way, the ownership group for the Bengals got a D+, better than their treatment of families. How about that? I will say this, and just to be fair, and making these grades public, Cincinnati Bengals did receive high marks, an A- for their locker room, but they recently renovated, so they should be given a lot of credit for that. They got an A- in the training room and training staff, so they do a really good job of taking care of their players. This according to the grades that the Players Union issued about the Bengals. The weight room gets an A-. Zach Taylor, head coach, gets an A-. So look, I think if you're a head coach and you're getting this kind of grades and your team hasn't gone to the playoffs over the last 2 years, that's phenomenal. I agree. I think very highly of Zach Taylor. I would give him an A for sure. If you're asking what would Solomon Wilcots give him, I absolutely love Zach Taylor. Anyone who's crying for his job, they're just not paying attention. The guy does a wonderful job with the offense, wonderful job with Joe Burrow. He does a wonderful job with players on that side of the ball. Now, look, when he hires a defense coordinator, he doesn't pick the players. He doesn't get to draft the players. He just does. You got to understand, this organization is run differently. The head coach is not in charge of drafting players. So when you see the deficiencies on the defensive side of the ball, that is not fall under the purview of Zach Taylor as the head coach. He's doing the best with what they give him. You know, he's cooking the dinner, but he doesn't get to shop for the groceries, okay? Position coaches got the grade of a B. How about that? So I think that's pretty cool too. Sorry about the interruption. The defensive coordinator, Al Golden, got a B+. So even people understand that that's not under his jurisdiction, that he should get to pick his own players, and maybe he would be held more accountable. So I'd love to get your thoughts. I want you to kind of, send me your thoughts of what you think about the Bengals' overall grades. Again, F, food and dining area. F in nutrition and dietitian. F, treatment of families. That is a problem because when it's time to recruit players in free agency, players talk around our league. They communicate, hey, how is my family going to be treated? They already know before they make the trip. So it leaves the Bengals maybe having to pay twice as much to get a player on the free agent market than a team who takes care of their families, take care of the wife and the kids during their game day experience. So that's something Cincinnati Bengals might want to think more about, making sure that they get really good grades there, okay? So let's move on. Let's talk a little bit about what's happening with Joe Burrow, because I think it's important because I'm running into articles all over the place as we did enter free agency. Remember, March 11, It's the first day of the new league year. By the way, the collective bargaining agreement states that, roughly 65%, somewhere between 65% of the overall gross revenue is shared with the players. That's how every year they come to a conclusion of what the salary cap is going to be. The salary cap for the upcoming 2026 season is over $300 million. $301.2 million is going to be shared with the players. That's what the Bengals have, that kind of money to spend on players. And obviously, Joe Burrow is the highest paid player on the team. But right now, the Cincinnati Bengals have not gone to the playoffs each of the last 3 years. And Joe Burrow has voiced, the experience of what it's been like over these last few years. And here's what he said back in December as the team was heading towards the 6-10 record. He said, if I want to keep doing this, I have to be having fun to do it. I've been through a lot, and it's not a lot of fun. Then what am I doing this for is what he asked. So that's the mindset that I'm trying to bring to the table. Burrow dealt with significant injuries throughout his career. We know this. Of the 6 seasons that he's been in the NFL, he's only played through every game of the entire season in 3 of the 6 years that he's played. Only once, and that was this past year, did he only play in less than 10 games, played in 8 of their 17 games this year. They were 5-3 in those 8 games in 2025. In 2020, remember, after 10 games, he was lost to an ACL injury, poor protection. 2023, had a torn ligament in his right wrist, played in 10 games that year, fluke injury. Let's just write it off. Got nothing to do with being injury prone. It's total fluke. This year, a grade 3 turf toe injury, being sacked on the play. Only played in 8 games, did fight his tail off to come back and play during the season. I thought that was phenomenal that he was able to bounce back and play. So clearly, when you start to hear these kind of statements, and the national media at large is asking, are the Cincinnati Bengals in danger of losing their star player? Now, Joe Burrow is under contract. I think he has at least 1, if not 2 more years of guaranteed money on the contract. I don't think he's going anywhere this offseason. But I think we could say that we're at a crossroads. The entire organization knows they got to get it right this offseason. Zach Taylor knows it. Duke Tobin knows it. Everybody knows it. The Bengals have to have a year where this ends with a trip to the postseason and maybe even a deep run to the postseason. If they don't know it, then just go ask Sean McDermott in Buffalo. There will be changes, okay? But to the front office, there could be even a greater threat that your star quarterback for the second time in franchise history will decide to no longer play for the franchise. I'm not putting words in Joe Burrow's mouth. I'm not saying that's what he said, because he didn't. He just said, if I'm not having fun, why am I doing this? To have this conversation, it's not off the table. Don't look at me as someone who's starting trouble for the franchise, who are trying to predict doomsday. If you miss the playoffs for 4 consecutive seasons, despite having one of the league's best quarterbacks, and if you don't think things are going to change, if you don't think that the players, that the organization, that the coach, the GM, everyone is in question, everything is in jeopardy. And considering that Carson Palmer has already done this after an inept, horrible season in 2010, he decided not to come back in 2011. And I believe Carson Palmer was the most talented quarterback that the Cincinnati Bengals has ever had. His talent was off the chart. He could throw it. The guy was beautiful to watch play. And first of all, first-rate gentleman, by the way. And he decided he wanted to play elsewhere. That, look, I'm not good enough to help you guys get it done. I'm done. You find somebody else. I'm going to find another team. That's what he decided. And then in 2011, Cincinnati Bengals went and moved forward with Andy Dalton and A.J. Green. So the precedent's already been set. that if you can't win with a franchise quarterback, a quarterback who's been taken with the first overall pick in the draft, Carson Palmer was taken with the first overall pick, 2003, I believe it was, right? And Joe Burrow taken with the first overall pick in 2020. If you can't win with quarterbacks taken that high, they have some autonomy, at least enough to say, look, it's not working out. If I wasn't playing well, you guys would move on for me. If it's not going well for me, then I can move on without you. So that's on the table. And many of the national writers are beginning to have these conversations. I was just at the NFL Scouting Combine. In the forums I was in, this was a conversation. I'm just letting you know. This is being discussed all around our league. And writers, national writers, are beginning to write about it. I don't think Joe Burrow is feeding into that. I don't think the Bengals are feeding into that. I'm just telling you what's being discussed. And if this team should go a fourth consecutive season without making the playoffs, there's going to be a lot of separation. There's going to be there's players, coaches, general managers, scouts, internal, external people. There are going to be a lot of people held accountable, okay? And when players in our league today have some say-so into who they will play for and who they won't play for. Why do you think great players have left great teams? Tom Brady didn't play his whole career with the Patriots, right? Aaron Rodgers didn't play his entire career with the Green Bay Packers, right? We believe Pat Mahomes will play his whole career in Kansas City as long as Andy Reid's around. And Clark Hunt knows what's good. But it's all on the table for a team that has tried very hard but has missed the playoffs in 3 straight seasons. If it happens for a fourth time, there could be a lot of changes. And I do believe that Joe Burrow has sent the message with those quotes and those statements that I read from his comments made back in December. Duly noted, Joe B. Duly noted, my friend. Also, look, the Cincinnati Bengals went shopping for new talent at the Scouting Combine in Indianapolis. It is currently known that they are very much interested. Here are their needs this offseason. They need to find an edge rusher on defense. They need a corner. They need a safety. And they need defensive linemen, interior and on the edge. Let's just say they need not only players on defense at all 3 levels of the defense, they need playmakers. They need difference makers. That's what I'm calling it. That's what I've labeled it. And I even heard Duke Tobin use a commonly used phrase on the Believe in Bengal podcast. You heard it here first. They need force multipliers on the defensive side of the ball. And I would concur. I would agree. And here are 2 that I believe they can get. Did you see what Sonny Styles did, linebacker from The Ohio State University, what he did at the combine camp? 43-inch vertical? Are you kidding me? Guy ran a 4.6 40. He runs as fast as some safeties in the NFL. Had an 11.2 feet broad jump, 11 feet, 2 inches. That's incredible. That's almost like leaping over Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. It is. You leap over Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Woo. It's incredible. I believe he's going to be there when the Bengals go on the clock at number 6. So, Cincinnati Bengals fans, who would you want more? Sonny Styles as a linebacker, and the Bengals can use a playmaking difference maker at the linebacker position? Or would you want Caleb Downs, the Thorpe Award-winning best defensive back in all of college football in 2025? Because I do believe the Bengals are going to have an opportunity to get Caleb Downs. I know some people who would trip over themselves if the Bengals ended up with Caleb Downs. And I'm talking former players who love the Bengals dearly, would love to see them add a play. We need a safety, by the way. Someone to plug in alongside of Jordan Battle. Someone to play in that secondary with DJ Turner and Dax Hill. Look, the Cincinnati Bengals, by the way, are huge Ohio State Buckeye fans. Mike, Katie, and Troy, they're pretty much at every Ohio State home game every single weekend. They know where to find the players. They know that Ohio State has big-time players. Now, have they went after some of the Ohio State Buckeye players and struck out? Yes. They went. They have, but hey, I don't mind if you swing big and miss as long as you swing, as long as you take a cut, as long as you're going after the guys that we just mentioned. Okay, if you can get a Sonny Styles, a Caleb Downs, I would prefer Downs if you were asking me. But if we end up with Sonny Styles, I would be happy. I wouldn't want to see them pass on Caleb Downs to get Sonny. No, I would prefer Caleb Downs. He is a baller. I'm putting him in the category with an Ed Reed, with a Troy Polamalu. It's time for us to have one of those on our team in that division. And he would make a difference in Al Golden's defense. There's no doubt about it. Now let's talk about Trey Hendrickson, because we only have a few minutes left. How many of you want Trey Hendrickson back? I want you to let us know by going onto our site, go to our YouTube page, and you can send me a message. I would love to have him back, because I don't think we get better if we draft or sign another defensive end in free agency and we lost Trey Hendrickson. I think we need to add to Trey Hendrickson. And so I don't think we need to be putting him through any crises of negotiation. If you use the franchise tag on him, it's going to cost you somewhere around $34 to $35 million, $34.8 million. Remember, he gets 120% over the contract that he had for last year. So be ready to pay. And that's going to be a hefty salary. So you can use the franchise tag. You have till March 3rd to do so. That'll be interesting. But Duke Tobin said this: I will never rule out any possibility of Trey returning to the team. He's a good football player. I would never rule out the possibility. We're in the business of having good football players on the team, so I can't rule it out, but I don't know what the future holds. Sounds like it's not up to him, right? I'm sure he's going to weigh in off an opinion. He's going to tell Mike whatever they're going to tell him. I do believe the Cincinnati Bengals have a problem with, if you're 30 years older, they don't want to give you money. If you don't want to move along and play multiple positions on the defensive line or move around, you're always wanting to line up on one side and rush the quarterback like Trey does. I think for the Bengals, that's been a problem. Look, he's not Myles Garrett. No one's saying he is, because if he was, he'd be asking for $40 million. And last I checked, I don't think he is. So maybe his agent is, but I don't think it'll take $40 million to get Trey Hendrickson under a long-term deal. I don't think the Cincinnati Bengals want him for a long-term. They want to rent. They don't want to buy. Renting is a short-term option. That's what the franchise tag is. Bengals have plenty of money under the salary cap. They have the seventh most. They rank 7th in the NFL in total cap space. I think at my last count was somewhere in the neighborhood of $43 million. That number now has gone up substantially with now the new with the new salary cap number that has been reached. $301 million salary cap for the 2026 season. So, look, the Bengals can rent or they can buy. They can rent Trey Hendrickson using the franchise tag, and that gets him one more year. He's 30. So if you don't want to sign him up to a long-term deal, be a renter. Or you can buy and give him a long-term deal that pays him about $30 million more. You can lower his cap number and go out and spend that money on other players, but yet you sign him to a 3-year deal, give him 2 years worth of guaranteed money that keeps him on the team for 2026 and 2027. But I don't think the Bengals want to commit, particularly with Trey coming off a core muscle injury from this past season. To their reasoning, you don't want to invest in a player over 30 because they're susceptible to injury. And last year, I think, was another receipt or evidence on the scale that sort of backs up their stance. I would be more inclined to do the long-term deal, but it's not my money. All right, everyone, let us know what you think about what we had to say on this another edition of the Believe in Bengal podcast presented by FanDuel. We appreciate you joining us. We hope to see you again next week. Thanks for joining us, everyone.